In this video, we will look at the layout of an account. So up until now, we only wrote in the amount in the account. So we just got used to the entry of a debit and a credit entry amount-wise. So now the complete layout of the general ledger will look like follows. We already said that the account name is to be written at the top in the middle. So as already explained, the name of the account is written at the top in the center. On the right hand of the account, we write down the reference number. So this is reference number B8. Now the B stands for balance sheet, account number 8. So it just starts at 1 and goes in chronological order until you get 8, numerical order. So therefore, if it's a balance sheet account, it will start with a B. If it's a nominal account, it will start with an N. So the numbers of the accounts will follow on each other. Then we've already said the debit and credit side of the account will look exactly the same. And you can see this is identical to that. The only big reason is that in the one side or on the one side, I will use my columns to increase the account, and on the other side I will use my columns to decrease the account, but my information that I would write in is exactly the same. Therefore, date, details, folio, amount. So the date column, as we have written here in the first bullet, the date is the transaction takes place, will be entered in the date column. But you can see underneath the date column, there's two columns basically. So in the first column, we will write the month and the year. And in the second column, we will write the actual date in that month and year. So if I can zoom in a little bit, we will write it as follows. We will say, this is 2015, June, for instance, 15th. So that's how I will write in the date. Then the next column is the details column. And this is where I write the name of the account that will be influenced by the transaction to be entered in the other account. So in other words, we call this the Contra account details. So say for instance, I'm using bank and vehicles, or bank and creditors, or bank and current income. The other account's name, that is what I would write in the details column here. So let's say for instance it's current income, then I would write here, this money that I'm putting into my bank is put into bank due to current income. In current income's account, in the details column of current income, I would then again write bank. So in other words, my two accounts point towards each other by means of the contra details column in each account. Then I also have a folio column, which you're not going to use at first, but later on in term 3 when we get to journals, we will start using it. So this folio column, this is where the subsidiary journal information is written. So where the transaction was entered, we will see this column later when we start working with subsidiary journals. That's only in term 3. So for now, we can leave it alone. Then the last column is my amount column. And again in the amount column you can see there's two columns in one column. So that is only for rands and cents. So I will write it as follows. 2,000 rand and no cents. So the first column is then allocated for your rand amount, and your second column for your cents. And that's as easy as that. So let's consider the following example, and in this example there's 4 transactions that we need to put into our general ledger accounts. So Menlo Hairdressers was involved with the following transactions during May 2009. Enter the transactions correctly in the general ledger of Menlo Hairdressers. So on May 1st, now before we consider the transactions, let's just consider the procedure. With every transaction, we need to know which 2 accounts are involved. One account will be debited, as practiced in the previous video, and another account will be credited. You always have to decide on 4 things. Firstly, which 2 accounts is to be influenced. Secondly, what type of accounts are they? Third, which account is then to be debited or credited? Actually, third would be, are these accounts increasing or decreasing? And then fourth, which account is debited and which one is credited? Always, 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 always make sure that you enter a debit entry in one account and a credit entry in another account. So transaction number 1, the owner, C. van der Merwe, deposits 120,000 Rand capital in the business's current bank account. So identify your 2 accounts first. My first account is obviously going to be capital. My second account is then obviously going to be bank. So I'm going to use capital and I'm going to use bank. So when we analyze it, I can see that bank is my one account. That is an asset and I want to increase the asset. Therefore, bank needs to be debited. Then capital also needs to increase, but capital increases owner's equity on the credit side. So therefore, 120 will go to the capital on the credit side and to bank on the debit side. So when I go to capital, you can always go and make notes for yourself, which is always nice. If I consider all of my accounts just very quickly, capital is an owner's equity, which increases and decreases. Equipment is an asset that increases and decreases. Bank, also an asset, increases on debit, decreases on credit. Current income is an owner's equity, but because it's an income, I will circle the income side because it will favor the income side. Opposite to rent expense, which is also owner's equity, but owner's equity that favors the negative side because it's an expense account. So my first account to be used is capital, and I wanted to increase my capital, therefore I need to put it on the credit side. I'm going to say it's going to go to bank 120,000 Rand. So therefore I write the entry of where it's going to go in my details column. That's your Contra account details. So in bank, I then have to say that 120,000 increases my bank. Why? Because of capital. So therefore that capital and that bank points towards each other. So in bank, I have the other account that says capital. But in capital, I have the other account that says bank. So I can clearly see where the other entry for this specific transaction went. Our next transaction on the 9th, we purchased equipment by check, 29,000 Rand. So I need to identify my 2 accounts. Easy, I bought equipment, I paid by check, so my check indicates that bank was used. So my 2 accounts would be equipment and bank. So for equipment and bank, I will now go and analyze what's happening here. So equipment needs to increase my assets, and assets increases on the debit side. Therefore, equipment would be my account debited. So I'm going to, in equipment, show the debit of 29,000 Rand. Where is this debit going to go to as well on the credit side? On the credit side, it will go to bank. So therefore, I write my Contra details as bank. Then equipment is the account debited, so the account credited would be bank, because bank is also an asset, but because I've bought these equipment, my assets are decreasing if I look at bank. So in bank, I'm going to say I'm losing 29,000 Rand on the credit side due to the fact that I'm buying equipment. So equipment was the account that I debited, and in here you can see the account that I credited was bank. So it points towards each other once again. Please also note the dates that I used the whole time. For the first entry, the transaction took place on the 1st, so I write May 1st as my date. The second entry, however, took place on the 9th of May, so I write May 9th, May 9th. So the exact date on which the transaction happened, that's the date that I write in my general ledger accounts in the date column. The third transaction. The business receives 1,900 for haircuts done. So receives means that I'm adding money onto my bank account. So the receives tells me that bank was used. For haircuts done. Haircuts done can be classified as a service that's been presented. So therefore it will go to current income. So my two accounts used is firstly bank and secondly current income. So bank is my defining factor. If I can figure out what's happening to bank, then it's easy to think what's going to happen to current income. Remember, bank is an asset, and I want to show that my bank is increasing. So therefore, bank would definitely have an entry on the debit side so that my assets can increase. If bank is then the debit account, then current income would automatically create a credit, and it works out because current income increases owner's equity, and it does so on the credit side of the account. So therefore, current income, I can show that it's increasing. Look at the date, please. It's May 16th. I'm going to say that my other account would be bank, 1,900. So if this is the debit, this is the credit, then I need to go and put through the debit, which is going to be in bank 1,900. So therefore, current income will be my account debited. Bank will be my account debited, but current income will be the contra entry, and then current income would be my account debited with bank in there as the contra entry. So again, I have a debit and a credit of both 1,900 Rand, so therefore my accounting equation is in balance. And then the last transaction, the 17th, the monthly rent has been paid by check for 5,800. So let's consider our two accounts. Rent that we've paid means that it's rent expense. So my one account is going to be rent expense. I paid by check, so therefore check tells me that I've used my bank account. So my two accounts used, very easy, rent expense and bank. Now remember, bank needs to pay the money. So therefore bank is an asset that decreases, and this happens on the credit side. Then it makes sense that rent expense, which is an owner's equity account, should be on the debited side, because what happens to owner's equity on the debit side? It decreases. So all expenses always goes to the debit side of owner's equity, because that's the decreasing side. So in rent expense, I'm going to say I'm losing money. So my expense of 5,800 is going out of my owner's equity account. We're actually creating the expense for it, and the other account that I will use is going to be bank. So I write that in the details column. So I now need to take this to my bank account, so therefore I'm going to show it in bank as well. So if it's a debit in rent expense, there needs to be a credit in bank, saying that it's comes from rent expense. So bank is the account, rent expense is the account debited, and then bank would be the account credited. Then we have successfully done all 4 of these transactions, each with their debits and credits. So we are well in balance for this exercise. Then just the last note, just to remember, the bank account the whole time is debited with money that we receive, and it is credited with money that we pay out. So in other words, the debit side is the receipt side and the credit side is the payments side, if I look at the bank account specifically.